Bonjour tout le monde. It's wonderful to be with my friends from the UU Fellowship of Paris, even as I'm still here in Knoxville, Tennessee, to celebrate this season with you. You know, when I visited with your congregation in the past, I noticed a pattern in my visits. I noticed that when it was a warm, sunny day, I would be out in the parks frolicking with the god Pan, or walking through nature with the goddess Diana. But when it was cold and wet and miserable, I always ended up in some church somewhere with Jesus and Mary. And so in this cold, wet, dark season, it's good to be indoors. And this is a season where Jesus and Mary loom large. It's Jesus' birthday, after all. And so they loom large during this season. So I'm glad we're indoors and warm. This time of year, I often think of my grandmother. My grandmother played a large role in my life. And I remember going to visit her once. I was in Atlanta because I was studying for the ministry, and the UUA required me to take 3 days of a career aptitude test that involved a lot of personality tests and things like that. And so when my grandmother asked me why I was in town, I simplified it and said, well, I'm here for 3 days of personality testing. And she said, 3 days? I don't think I have that much personality. Well, needless to say, she did. And I think of her often. I remember thinking of her when I was visiting the Sacre-Cœur. That's one of the things I like to do when I'm in Paris, is go up in the evening and listen to the nuns sing the evensong service. And as I was in the service once, I just looked up at the ceiling, and there, Jesus looms pretty large in that building, a pretty big image of Jesus. And I remember thinking to myself, most of us are never going to be that famous. Most of us are never going to have our image plastered on the ceiling of a church somewhere. I have been minister of this congregation in Knoxville, Tennessee for 20 years, and, there's no picture of me on the ceiling, and it's a white ceiling, so, there's room for a picture if they wanted to do it. But here's the thing, I just don't have that much personality. Not that much personality. Well, during the Christmas season, the personality of Jesus looms large. But here's the thing, in Unitarian Universalist Church, personality isn't the most important thing when it comes to celebrating the season. As the 19th century Unitarian minister once said, it's hard to see why the great truths of Christianity rest on the personal authority of Jesus more than the axioms of geometry rest on the personal authority of Euclid or Archimedes. The authority of Jesus as of all teachers, one would naturally think, must rest on the truth of his words and not their truth on his authority. In other words, Jesus said things because they were true. They're not true because Jesus said them. It's not all about his personality. Personality is not the most important thing. The most important thing is truth. The personality of the teacher is not as important as the principles that are taught. The teacher is less important than the teachings. And it's not always an either-or choice, though. There's a paradox here. Because people who live lives of goodwill and sacrificial service, people who bring their hearts into the world and a life of service, such people who practice these kinds of principles tend to have very radiant personalities. One of the reasons I like to go to the Sacre-Cœur when I'm in Paris is because it looks like 3 ice cream cones. Now here's a true story. When I was in seminary, I was standing in line at a Dairy Queen and I bought 3 ice cream cones for my family. And when I turned around, there was a man in line who said, "Hey, aren't you a Unitarian Universalist minister? Could you explain to me, what do Unitarian Universalists believe? Well, I looked at the man, and I looked at my ice cream cones, and I thought, this really needs to be a short, simple answer. I need to learn how to explain Unitarian Universalism before my ice cream melts. So I've come up with some short, simple definitions of who we are. Sometimes I will tell people that we are an interfaith congregation where people of all faiths can find common ground and work together for the common good. Sometimes I will say we're a liberal, progressive congregation dedicated to social change and environmental responsibility. Something short and simple you can say before your ice cream melts. One of my other favorite short, simple explanations of what we believe is an affirmation which we say in our services on Sunday morning. It goes like this. Maybe you say it as well. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. When a member of my congregation who died this year, who I miss greatly, Bee DeSelm, when she was running for county commission here in Knoxville, Tennessee, in the buckle of the Bible Belt, sometimes people would ask her, where do you go to church? And she would say, I go to the Unitarian Universalist Church. And then they would have a follow-up question, is that a Christian church? And she would answer, it's Christian and more. I've always liked that explanation because when I think about the ministry of Jesus, I think about the last night of his life when he humbled himself and took the form of a servant and washed the feet of his disciples and then said to them, a new commandment give I unto you, that you love one another as I have loved you. Love is the spirit of this church. Wherever people practice love, we're at home, we're in church. Now, when theologians talk about Jesus, they speculate about what he thought. And when historians look over the historical record, they're trying to figure out what he taught. But from a spiritual and a practical perspective, the most important thing is how much he loved and the implications it has for how we love one another. It's not so much, religion is not so much about theology. It's not so much about what's in our heads. It's about what's in our hearts, the love that's in our hearts. A few years back, I was a minister in residence at Ferry Beach. And if you go to their cafeteria, they have ingredients for every item that's there. So you can make sure that you have no allergies to what might be in any item that you might want. And so you'll see something there, and it'll be a long list of ingredients. And one of the ingredients that is always included in every item on the menu is love. Love is the ingredient. That's the most important ingredient in spirituality. That's the most important ingredient in religion. Now, there is a Knoxville, Tennessee connection to Paris that I became even more aware of this year when I went to the Knoxville Museum of Art for a exhibition on the art of Buford Delaney. Now, Buford Delaney is from Knoxville, Tennessee, but he did most of his paintings in Paris, and that is where he became famous as an artist. And as I was looking at some of his art, I read one of the placards that said, "The art of Buford Delaney is a study in light revealed, a light that illuminates, redeems, reconciles, and heals." Here's some other pictures. A study in light revealed, a light that illuminates, reconciles, and heals. And if you think about it, that's what a personality is. It is a revelation of light. And we can see Buford Delaney's personality in his creations. It's a revelation of light. Now, the Quakers have a saying They say, we all have a measure of that light, which Christ had without measure. That's another way of saying the light shines brighter in some people. I mean, not all of us are going to get our pictures on the ceilings. Not all of us are going to be, globally famous. Because the light shines brighter in some people than others. But the light shines in everyone. When I was going into ministry, an Episcopal priest said there are two kinds of ministers. He said, one minister takes you to the window and shows you the light. And the other kind of minister takes you to the window and poses in front of the light. And that is what we're called to do as spiritual people. It's not to pose in front of the light, but to take people to the window and show them the light. To be a revelation of that light. To be transparent to transcendence. To let the light shine in you and me and to see it in all people. To be a window that is a revelation of light. In Unitarian Universalist congregations all around the world, we celebrate Christmas differently. It's said that in some Unitarian Universalist congregations, the only time you hear the words Jesus Christ is when the janitor hits his thumb with a hammer. And in some congregations, it's a fairly secular holiday. And I was looking through some of the old sheet music that's here in our office, and I came across a secular version of Jingle Bells. Now, I remember thinking, isn't Jingle Bells secular enough? But this particular Jingle Bells wanted to be even more secular than dashing through the snow in a one-horse open sleigh. And so here are the lyrics to this most secular of versions of Jingle Bells. Humanists, humanists, humanists are we. Oh, how good it is to be superstition-free. I think there's a good reason that sheet music is gathering dust in a closet. And that's no insult to humanism, because it's really a commentary on that particular song. Because in the broadest sense of the word, we are all humanists. In the Unitarian Universalist Church, the goal is not to make someone a better Christian or a better Jew or a better Buddhist or a better Muslim or a better Hindu. Our goal is to make everyone a better human being, to help people to become the best human beings it is possible to be. And I think we could all encourage each other to be the best possible people we can be, because we all need a little bit of encouragement. We all need a lot of encouragement during this time, which has been really hard, this time of global pandemic, this time of social isolation, this time when the nights are longer and the days are shorter, a time when so many people are sitting in darkness awaiting a great light. This has been a very hard season we've all been going through. So let's encourage one another. Because I'm a Unitarian Universalist minister, I like to tell people my favorite Christmas story comes from the Sufi Muslim tradition, and it does. So let me tell the story. And I've drawn some pictures for you. So, once upon a time, there was a teacher. And this teacher taught people how to make fire. They had never known fire before, and he brought light into their lives by building fires. And he traveled all around the world, teaching people how to make fire. And when he got at the end of his journey, he decided to go visit some places he'd been before to see how people were doing with the fires they were making. Well, when he got to the first village, it was pretty dark. The sun was starting to set, but it was getting dark. But he did find people sitting around reading a book. And, the picture in the book looked kind of like him. But nobody recognized him. And he said, what are y'all doing? And he said, well, we're reading this book about this great teacher who taught us how to make fire. And we read this book every day, and we tell stories from this book all the time. It's just a really great book. And the teacher looked around and said, yeah, but, it's kind of dark. Where's your fire? And the people said, well, we forgot how to make fire. But man, what a great teacher. Well, the teacher wandered through the woods until he got to the next village. And there he found people bowing down to a statue. And the statue looked kind of familiar too. And they were bowing down the statue. But nobody recognized him for some reason. Didn't recognize the teacher. And he said, what are you doing? And he goes, oh, this is a statue of the teacher who taught us how to make fire. And just a wonderful teacher. And we just love this teacher. And so we built this statue. And every day we come out and bow down to the statue. And the teacher looked around and said, but it's kind of dim. Where's your fire? And they said, oh, well, we forgot how to make fire. We went over to the next village, and there was fire there, but the fire was in a temple. And the only people who were warm were the priests who were inside the temple, sort of warming their hands over the fire. And everybody outside was cold. Everybody outside was in the dark and cold and freezing. And then he continued walking to the next village, and he could see the light in the next village before he got there. And when he got there, he could look into windows, and he could see fire and fireplaces and candles on tables. And he could see people walking around with torches and gathered around a fire singing campfire songs and roasting marshmallows and doing all the things you do around a campfire. But nobody recognized him. And nobody remembered the story about the teacher. And nobody remembered who he was. But he left happy. He left that village very happy because even though no one could remember the teacher, everyone was practicing his teachings. So the Sufi Muslim tradition offers us insights for this season. And we should all aspire for every one of us to kindle that light that is within us, to let that fire that everyone has blaze. So the next time you have an opportunity to take a personality test, whether it's through your work or education process, next time you have a chance to take a personality test, don't worry. Don't worry if you think you don't have enough personality. The most important thing is not personality. The most important thing is to be a window to the light, to bring more light and more warmth and more energy into this world. You may have only a measure of light, but uncover it and let it shine. In the Christmas season, we would be wise to remember the words of the Chinese proverb, it is better to light a candle than to curse the darkness. So Joy Noel, everyone, and may we, by lighting our candle, by being a light, turn every city all over the earth into a city of light. Joy Noel, Paris. Merry Christmas.